I mean, it's not completely wrong. Okay, so here's another one. Which job do you want, and what do you want it for? Which job? I mean, that we isolated down in another video. We isolated down all the jobs that are out there in tech, and why you want a blacksmith job in late stage capitalism to keep afloat and survive for you and your family. But now we have to talk about how do you weather the storm. And so I'm going to do this in story form, like I always do. I have weathered two very, very substantial storms in the industry. Three, if you count the crash of 2009, which was the mortgage crash, which has nothing to do with tech. So in 2000 was the biggest tech bubble burst I've ever experienced. In 2000, the dot-com bubble burst, and companies were littering the pavement everywhere. Anybody who happened to live through that, you know what I'm talking about. And the other one was quite recent. There was another one. There was another round of layoffs. I think you could probably make the case there was another one in 2007 as well. Um, but it's pretty much a given fact that if you're working in tech, you are going to live through massive, massive layoffs. And when they happen, how do you survive? How do you survive layoffs? Because they're going to happen, and this it happens every time. This is how the bubble works. You guys, if you don't know, you probably know. But what ends up happening is all of these. It's really just it's really a symptom. It's cancerous, horrible capitalism, right? It's like people with money. Really, by the way, really stupid venture capitalists. They don't even do minimal research into the value. I mean, this is, if you want to understand why these dot-com bubble bursts, it's the same exact reasons that the Big Short happened. Same exact reasons. The Big Short. So if you want to understand this stuff, and by the way, if you want a director who's like become, a hero in my book, because he had to make a deal with Hollywood in order to even be able to make that movie because he wanted to make it so bad. The Big Short. Go watch it. Watch the whole thing. It's got Margot Robbie in a bathtub. It's just hilarious, and it's very educational, and it will help you understand the dynamics that exist in a capitalist society, and particularly late stage capitalism, that cause massive failure. And the dynamics of that failure, whether it be for the mortgage or for be the dot-com bust in 2000, they're the same. It's always greed and hubris and laziness, and it's been the thing that they've kind of satirized on Silicon Valley so well. The series Silicon Valley, if you can stand to watch it, it's rather hard to watch. It's so painful sometimes. So if you go watch The Big Short, you'll see that it's like people dumping money, people with money who are stupid, who don't even look. They're looking to cash out really quickly. And whether they are venture capitalists who are dumping money in, or they're, engineers who just want to cash out fast, they just want to get in, get their money, and get out, which describes pretty much anyone who says that the only thing they want to do is work for a FANG company, as opposed to contributing to society. They just want to get rich and get out. And that look, I'm having a hard time talking about this because it really triggers me. The fact that so many people in America or in the world are so interested in just getting rich, taking advantage of everybody else, and getting out makes me very, very uncomfortable. The invisible hand, as quoted in Mr. Robot, driving everything, including the cost of having your teeth knocked out on the street by an angry. There's a great scene in Mr. Robot where the guy who lets himself be beat up for money, his rate has gone up. because it affects everybody. That's the whole message. Anyway, so what am I saying? How do you survive it? How do you survive this inflating greed? Money keeps getting dumped into shit that should never have had any money in it at all. And then people do little things to compete, and they add blink tags into Netscape, and they make Netscape incompatible with Microsoft so they can sell their browser and become Mike Andreessen, and then become this like completely soulless mofo. Anyway, yeah. Hi, how are we doing? We're making a video here. So these people are doing. How do you survive? How do you survive? What do you want to do? Well, I already told you, get a blacksmith job, right? Well, here's the thing about the blacksmith job. Okay, what do blacksmiths do? They keep things running, right? So this is why I keep saying the blacksmith job is the best job. Does the blacksmith spend the time making the next best sword, investing in a new weapon, perhaps, maybe a better way to put horseshoes on horses so they go faster? Yeah, blacksmiths do kind of invest in innovation and making things better and improving. But the most important thing about the blacksmith job is they keep, pardon my French, shit running. They keep everything moving. They keep it running. That means in the middle of a war, when something breaks down or a military gets blown up or something and they need to shore up the walls of something, they're the ones that call in. They call in the masons and which is kind of part of that. It's kind of part of that whole vein of support. These are operations jobs. These are jobs that keep the castle walls up, right? And they come in and they fix everything up and they make everything continue to run. And under in wartime when things are rough, they still are very much employed. In fact, they are critical. They're not getting, if they don't, everybody dies if they're not there, right? Because they're keeping things running. That is operations. Operations are the jobs that keep everybody alive, whether it be a firefighter or it be an infrastructure engineer or a network engineer or a security analyst or any of these things. These are the jobs that keep the systems running. They don't produce new value, they maintain the existing value. And those are the jobs that never, ever get touched. In fact, if you lose your job in operations, it's usually because we've gone through a really amazing. I mean, even Homer Simpson doesn't lose his job. He's in operations doing the whole nuclear power plant thing. You guys, somebody's got to watch out those reactors. So it takes a really, really broken bubble to start letting go of people that are there to keep things running. Now, unfortunately, the downside of that is that people who are paid to keep things running don't ever make money. Plumbing, absolutely, man. Plumbers make crazy. So I come from my wife is from a plumber family. She's worked in plumbing her whole life. You want to know something else? Nobody wants these jobs, electrician jobs. We found this out like last year. Last year, there's electricians jobs. You know what they make? They will pay you. They will pay you to get an education, and they will pay you $25 an hour to work as an under person, who's apprenticed to other electricians, and then you will get an electrician's job, and you can make electrician. They make $80 an hour, man. And I'm talking like a hippie boomer guy. They make so much money, but nobody wants to touch it. Why? Because it's that filthy blue collar work. Meanwhile, the Sigma plumbers are driving around like, oh yeah. They're also very humble people. They don't show off their wealth. And there's actually a really fun statistic about the millionaires in America. Most of the millionaires in America, you'd never know it. You'd never know it if you saw them. They don't show off. They're not flashy. In fact, the statistic, God, I wish I have to find it. But the statistic is that the more likely you are to see somebody with a flashy car and everything, the less likely they are to actually be millionaires. The people who are driving around with the Sigma energy, those people are making bank. And in this particular area, it would be somebody building docks, electricians, operations people. You read that book, Millionaire Next Door? Yeah. Yep. I think you mean this book right here. Yeah, guess what the title it says. This is so funny. We found this. We were out IRL streaming. Can you see it? I kind of changed my. The inscription says, "It takes one to be me. Love, Dad. Christmas '98." We want to know the story there. I picked this book up completely randomly on an IRL stream to a bookstore that had free coffee, and there's a VOD of that. There's a clip of us picking that book up. We wanted to know what the thing. I paid like $5 for that book. Anyway, that's the truth. The truth of the matter is that most of the millionaires are people doing boring operational things. They're the mechanics or the people fixing the cars and keeping them working. And so why do you care, right? If you want to weather the storm, and I'm going to tell you again two very specific stories from my life that I'm just going to share. So in 2000, when the dot-com bubble burst, I had to make a change. So I think I told you the story already, but I'll tell you really quickly. I got hired by Nike. They paid double the salary. I got hired for a software engineering job doing Java development on as a part of I was the tech one the that was the tech lead kind of person on a team that was designed. It was going to be 75% travel. And we were going to go around and we were going to pitch in consulting gigs for IBM. And I was going to be, the in-house expert on software design, so that I could sit down with those teams and we could pitch these, these companies and sell them product. That job never happened. While I was over the 30 days where I was waiting in training, I was on $80 per team in New York. It was absolutely glorious, going through all of IBM standard onboarding. And in that time, learning, by the way, Mandrake Linux, that's what I was installing at the time. They're like, oh, that's cool. And while I was there, my job went away because IBM got hit with the dot-com problem. And so the financial industry just completely went away overnight. I'm not the financial industry. All of the, sort of experimental, let's make money things in IT died. They just died. They all got their plugs pulled. They all got their plugs pulled, and that included my position, which was going to be, going out there basically door to door to these big IT companies and selling them new IT products that we would build for them. And but everybody had pulled their budgets on that, which meant that IBM's like, no, no, we're not spending money on this team anymore. This team, in fact, not only does this team not work anymore, but this the entire division that was based in Charlotte, ironically, even though I wasn't living in Charlotte yet, was pulled. They pulled the plug on the whole thing. And I remember I went back to Oregon is where I was living, and I didn't have a job. I was working for IBM and I was getting paid. I was getting paid the money we agreed on, and I was talking to my manager. I was like, "What's the deal here? I'm still getting paid even though they just pulled my plug." And well, you're on the bench. I'm like, "What the hell does that mean?" I think you're on the bench. It's like you just need to find, you need to find another job. You have a certain amount of time. How long do I have? Oh, well, I mean, there's no real date. It's just like, you have to find another job within the company within a certain amount of time. They call it being on the bench. I'm like, I need direction here. I haven't even had a first day really. I've just been in training. What do I do? And I was making crazy good money at the time, what I thought it was good money. But I had two young kids and I was like, damn, I don't want to have to go find another job. So what did I do? Now, thankfully and completely accidentally, I had been fascinated by hardware and by building out my own computers. So I had built out my own Linux machine. I had done my own Linux installation on old hardware. I gotten old computers that smelled like cats from people that didn't want their computer anymore, and I put Linux on there. And I was always playing around and tinkering with Linux in my garage, and I was really interested in operations and Linux. And I was always fascinated. I always looked up when I was a teleport. I always looked up to the engineers that were there. But I was, the dopey web guy. I mean, I'm speaking sort of self-deprecatingly about how I felt like they looked at me. I'm sure they didn't look at me that way. There was a couple that did. There were a couple engineers there that I was the Perl CGI guy, and they thought I was, they thought I was a joke. Of course, these guys were high-end hackers and systems engineers who used Sun OS and Unix and had built up, entire internet service providers. And so, they were better than me. And it was actually one of them, Joey, who never, ever looked down on me, by the way. Absolute salt of the earth human being. Joey, thank you so much. He was the guy who told me, I was like, man, I wish I could do Linux. I wish I could do Unix at home. And he goes, well, there's always Linux. I had never even heard of it before. So this is, of course, kind of before this job thing happened. And so I'm sitting there, figuring it out. I started to play with Linux on my own time. Actually, the first Linux I ever installed was on a Mach 1 Linux. I installed Linux on my PowerPC Mac. It was the only computer I had, and it's like I'm gonna make the jump, and I deleted Apple Mac OS off of it and put Linux on there, and it did not run very well. It was a huge learning experience, but I was like, I'm gonna make this work no matter what. I don't care. And I struggled with that. I remember my toddlers on my knee while I was trying to get Linux to work on my Mac on PowerPC, which is just so silly. But I had actually learned sort of the beginnings of Linux and the beginnings of operations. You got to understand, back then you didn't just stick in a USB and reboot. This was 1997 Linux. It was I mean it's like Arch today, right? You learned a lot, and you had to, otherwise it just wouldn't work. So I learned a lot about operations, and the reason I'm telling you about this is because um, these are the things that led to me getting the next job. So I got on the phone. Essentially, it wasn't really a phone. It was kind of crazy. I had to use an old COBOL program on the mainframe to look up jobs at IBM. And I was able to look up a systems engineer. I didn't even know what to search for. I didn't even know what the job titles were, which is one of the reasons that we go through the job titles here, because you don't even know what you don't know. You don't even know what you're shooting for here. So knowing what the titles are kind of important. Um, and so at the time there were these jobs posted, and they posted systems engineer job, actually, sorry, systems admin, systems administrator, and you can't even find jobs for systems administrator today. I mean, go do a search on Indeed. That title has changed because of Google, unfortunately. God, I could rant about that. I could rant. I will another time. They ended up changing a perfectly good title, systems engineer, to site reliability engineer. And because Google made it popular, nobody can find any jobs for systems engineers. And we have to call it this horribly stupid term from Google, site reliability engineer, which they have deemed more or less to mean a systems engineer who codes. Guess what? All the good systems engineers already knew how to code. You didn't need to make a new title for this, idiots. Yeah, I'm talking to you, Google. Oh God, I just so many things come out of Google that people think are like so amazing. SRE is the new system, and hell yeah, did you not get the memo? Infrastructure engineer, mandatory. Anyway, so I actually looked at some of these jobs, and I ran across a man who would become my favorite manager of all time. Uh, and I called him up. I cold called him. I said I was hired in to IBM to work on X and such, but they pulled the job, and I am super. I've been doing Linux I've been doing Linux on the side. I help do some Linux I use Linux, from the command line in my last job, and I'm building Linux machines in my thing. I've always wanted to move into systems operations, system administrator, but I've never done it. So I'm technically a junior. And the Ron was his name. He's like, well, come on in and interview. We'll talk. And so he interviewed me, and I got to tell you, I was terrified. I was so terrified. I was so terrified. I was a very capable technologist, and I was a kick-ass Perl programmer because of all the web was all Perl back then. I could do things that some of the sysadmins could never do because I was a scripter, and because Perl was the language of the web, which also turned out to be the number one system administrator scripting language besides Shell. I was really capable of creating automations and scripts and things like that, which I ultimately would do for IBM and for many other people, including now. That's what I'm doing right now, is writing, API integrations with our machine learning job submissions. And anyway, so I'm sitting there interviewing with him. It's like, well, I can do this and this, and I kept kind of putting myself down. I was like, I've never really done it. I'm kind of nervous. I'm not gonna lie. And he's like, well, I'm sure you're gonna be fine. And so this absolutely amazing human being took a chance on me. I was a senior technologist in terms of particularly for Perl development. Oh my God, I'd given conferences on it, but I was still very much a junior engineer, and all of a sudden I've got like raised floor access, and I'm going into asking him what's halon and why should I care. By the way, it sucks your air out of your lungs if it goes off while you're in the room. All these things. I got to play with the suction cups and lift the things off the ground. I got to run network cables. I was like in cloud 9. I was like, what's RAID 5? I have no idea what that is. First time I had to change. But my skills actually came to play a lot, because while I was on that account, I ended up becoming the darling on the team when it came to Informix databases, because they couldn't optimize their database, and that was more of a programmer-y kind of thing to do. It wasn't so much in the, I'm going to change a disk out. It was more in the, well, we got to figure out what's wrong with the system, right? And I actually wrote some automations that identified I had a thing that told every time I was getting pinged by random things on the network because I was interested in security, and so I was able to uncover some systems that had been compromised and report them to the network guys. And so my skills actually came into play. But when it came to like changing out disks or talking about what CPU was better or provisioning hardware to buy, I was not the guy. Actually, thank God I had a good friend who became my number one chess partner, and he was from military background, so he knew all of that stuff. He knew all of the specs about everything, and so he had no idea what Linux was, never even tried to use it once. And I helped him use Linux, and then he helped me learn the other thing. And we had some really great. We have. Please don't contact me during my live streams when I'm making videos about this. I'll get to you in a second. So, so that is where we landed with the beginner boost stuff. So, what am I talking about? I lost my train of thought. I read the chat. I should not read the chat, especially when it's not related to what we're talking about. What was I talking about? Okay, so I got this job in system administration, even though I had been a software engineer and software developer. Why does this matter? Okay, so jump up forward to the entire end of the thing, and I'll tell you why it matters. And I'm not going to talk about the other time that the bubble burst because it was essentially the same thing. The moral of the story is this: if you want to be a constantly employed person who's also making really good money, learn how to code and learn operations. And here's why: you can change what side of the fence you're on, because I did it. I didn't plan it. It's not like I anticipated this change, but so so I went over. I was a system admin, right? So when the burst thing, when the economy, all right, here we go. When the economy is good, the money is making new stuff, and that's when the fintech, all those people left, and they started making all that money, and now they're like, oh no, we don't have jobs anymore. I'm like, boo hoo hoo. Yeah, sucks to be you. It's like all the engineers that are working for companies that are overinflated salaries, all of a sudden they're like, oh no, we don't have jobs. Yeah, because you were chasing the dollars. If you're going to chase the dollars during the boom cycle, then you need to be prepared for the bust cycle when it comes. And if you're not prepared for the bust cycle, you're an idiot, because it's coming. It is coming just like any other thing. There is one law of tech, and that is that tech gets inflated and then it gets corrected. Inflated, corrected, inflated, corrected. And if you're not around, if you don't have a strategy for when it gets corrected, you better be damn sure you saved a lot of money, because you're not going to be able to weather the storm when that thing crashes, because it will. Has every time. It does many times. Wait, even before I was around. So the way to do this is to make sure you can do operational tasks, which means running your own lab in your house, knowing how to run networking, knowing how those basics, those things that you could actually apply for a rather lowly job. I don't know if you saw, but the income for people who are doing operations jobs is much lower. Plumber, because they're blue collar within tech. They're not valued as much because you're not making the big Benjamins for the company. But when the companies have money and things are going good and the venture capital is flowing, the money is in software engineering. That's where the money is. So if you switch over to software engineering, you can make that. They changed my title at IBM, and I made 30 grand extra per year like that. I went from being an operations person in global services to being a senior software engineer in the software group, and they changed my title, and my money shot through the roof just because of a title change. I was doing exactly the same thing. We were working on a system that we built for global services that started to make Tivoli look bad. And so they sucked us into the Tivoli organization and said, we're going to seed your innovation into our application rather than competing against us. We had salespeople selling our product, and then the customers saying, well, what about this other product from Tivoli that sounds like the same thing? What the hell? And that created internal turmoil at IBM, and that ultimately ended with me getting sucked into an entirely different company, section within the company. And that's when I got to go to Toronto and visit and everything. And I realized that software engineering was a totally different career, even though I was still an operations guy who knew how to code really well. So that happened. Another thing, they hired me on the current position I'm on as a Kubernetes engineer. Oh no, we don't have anybody to automate our 80,000 lines of Perl code and turn it into a way so that other applications developers can submit stuff to our legacy ancient batch machine learning submission system, which we were also in charge of. Hey, I know how to code. I got to step in and make that API with another couple people on my team, and the people on my team ended up championing the need for it. But because I had the coding skills, I was able to step in and do it. Now, I didn't make a bump in salary because of that, but again, now not only am I essential to the company for operations, but now I'm one of two people on the team who know how to code Go, who wrote the integration API, because I have software coding skills. The point is not that I'm awesome. The point is, if you want to survive and you want to, be able to play both sides, you should learn how to be a respectable coder, a really good coder, and you should also be able to learn about the systems and how to keep them running. And if you want to become the guy or the person who actually writes code that helps to maintain and automate those systems, I mean, all of these new careers, the DevOps stuff and the cloud native engineering, all of that stuff is all code related. And that's where the whole SRE thing came in, more emphasis on coding in our operations. So the point is, it doesn't take that much extra time for you to learn how to code. You don't have to be a superstar lead code, staff software engineer. You don't have to be that. And by the way, you can't maintain that and also maintain your skills in Kubernetes or whatever. It gives only so much time in the day, but you can know how to code enough to be the rock star on the operations team. Because the operations team is going to inevitably, they're going to need to do automations, and they're going to do stuff like that. And everybody's going to be like, well, I just know how to change disks. And if you're the one who knows Bash and Perl and Python and Go, and you're going to be able to make those integrations and really shine. So that is, let's not talk about Proxmox. Proxmox is a horrible software tool unless you're just on one machine. Those recommendations, we'll do those recommendations later. So the takeaway from this rather long video, as usual, is learn to play both sides. And then when things are good, if you're jumping careers every 5 years, which you probably should do to maintain your value, when things are good, keep looking for jobs. You should always look for jobs, by the way. Any good manager knows that it's part of the thing for you to keep abreast of what the best possibilities are out there. And if a manager starts giving you crap for going to a career convention or a conference like that on your own dime because they think you're trying to run, then you've got a problem there. Okay, so over on the one side, making money is good and you can do it, but make sure that you don't lose your operation skills. And when you start to see the signs that the bubble is going to burst, might be time for you to jump ship and get into an operations career. And you can use all that extra money you made during the software career to go to the ops career, and you'll probably make at the same or slightly less, but you'll still be able to do it, and you'll be a rock star on that team because you'll have lots of software engineering stuff. And either when things get good again, you can go back over in the same company or not, and you can do it. Now, if there are some positions, I happen to be very fortunate right now because I have found an infrastructure engineer position, and whether I meant to do it or not, I've kind of carved out a niche for myself within the team as the go-to API infrastructure engineer. So I am the one, me and mostly one other guy are the ones that are maintaining and writing, and I've tried to teach other members of the team. It's not that I'm trying to be exclusionary. I'm legitimately trying to teach. Actually, on Fridays I've held Go classes, little tutorials on my team because I don't want to be one of two people standing when everything hits the fan. I mean, we are now responsible for literally millions of dollars of AI models that are getting processed every day, and if our stuff stops working, but that's a very good place to be because I'm the plumber now, right? Everybody needs a plumber. We all need a plumber when that stuff goes bad, right? And so I actually know how to, keep the stuff working and stuff like that. So anyway, that's the point I'm trying to make. The people who are pure, just one last comment. It's kind of a negative thing. The years that I spent as a pure software engineer on Nike.com and on the Tivoli team, were the years of my tech career I have enjoyed the least. And let me explain what I mean by that. People that do software engineering all the time, 24/7, have a totally different dynamic. First of all, software engineering teams, in my experience, and from talking with other people, are cutthroat. They're how many lines of code did you get out today? We have a deadline coming up. Why the hell aren't you done yet? I have experienced more stress in software engineering than any other career I've ever had. And in operations, I get the sense it's more like a firefighter, right? It's like when there's no fire, you're writing code, which is essentially like cleaning your equipment and doing little things to make your operations to make you more effective as a firefighter. But when there's a fire, you're the hero, and you got to work 24/7 for those that moment until your fire is put out. But it feels better because you have these moments of these sprints of really intense work where you've come out a hero and you've made a really significant difference. When you're a software engineer, this is my personal experience. Now, again, everybody's got different experience. When I was a software engineer, I felt like I was. It was like an emergency every day. Every day was an emergency. Every day was an emergency. There was like, oh no, this thing has got to be out by tomorrow, or the whole world's gonna die. It was this intense stress constantly, to the point that when I was at Nike.com, when Phil Knight said over in front of advertisers that Nike ID was going to be released on a given day, and we're like, there's no way that's going to make it. They jokingly taped us into our cubicles and brought us caviar and salmon locks because they were, well, keep the engineers fed, keep them paid, keep them coding. And I was like, how fast can you code? Code faster, code faster. Literally was getting paper cuts because there was no code. We were coding a job at the time, and I had to flip through. It was absolutely horrible. I lost my mind on that job. And then on top of all that, we were all overworked, and then they put us all in a room and they said, this is how it is in a .com. Get used to it. And everybody quit. 30%, 40% quit. And people talk like this work environment when a lot of people think they want to be software developers for the game industry. And I'm like, that's the worst of all. The game industry has a noted bad, infamous reputation for literally killing software engineers by pushing them beyond their limits to the point where they just can't take it anymore. And it's like so when I was doing software engineering, even when it was on a totally boring project, like Tivoli, where I was basically just looking for memory leaks in C code in software that was tattletaling on corporations that weren't paying enough per license for their Tivoli software. It was this the most soul, emptying sort of Joe versus the volcano job I've ever had. That's when I started SkillStack, by the way, because I was done with it. I was like, I want more out of my life. I don't want to just do this. So software engineers, they not only are you pushed like it's a fire the whole time, but then you end up realizing out of nowhere. So we were working on a project. I can't remember where it was. It wasn't Night. It was the Tivoli thing. I was working on this one project, and they were pushing us really hard on this thing. And then out of nowhere, they canceled the entire project. We had thousands of hours in the project. Thousands of hours in this project. And all of a sudden, they just pulled the plug. Nope, we're not interested anymore. So all of this awesome code that I had written, all of these, finely crafted algorithms and the package, the art part of it, it was all completely, I couldn't put it out on open source because it was all proprietary. So I had to just throw it away. All of it just went away. I just didn't do anything. I was like, that is not what I want out of life. And I'm telling you, my impression is that is how software engineers, that's their life. Their life is coming up with these really cool systems and everything, and then having people decide they don't want to use that system and have all their work thrown in the trash. So if you do go with the system engineer kind of thing, please just know that I'm software engineer. If you're going to go with the software engineer thing, and I don't discourage you from doing it, there are people that are natural software engineers. And by the way, distinguish yourself from programmer. Programmers don't make any money at all. They're told what to do, versus the software architects and developers. Those are two very different jobs, and those jobs are actually illustrated here on the Bureau of Labor and Statistics. If you go to Bureau of Labor and Statistics, you can see the difference between computer programmers who make almost 100,000 these years with a bachelor's, and with 11% decline. So these are the people who are being affected. These are the people that are being absolutely replaced by AI. They're just writing code. They're being told what to do. Why are computer programmers going down and software engineers is going up? Where is it? Here, software developers. Software developers is going up 25%. Why? Because they're the ones who are thinking through the systems, what is needed. And I assume that includes, middleware, API kind of people. So those are the jobs. That's where the jobs are. So just absolutely do not get a programmer job. Programmers are the ones that are getting pushed the hardest. Their jobs are going away. They're going to be replaced by AI, and they're also always taking orders from some other person. You want to be the person giving out the orders. Um, so that's it. Um, so let's. I don't know what else to say. I think that's it. That's it. Learn to code and also learn operations, and then straddle the two and get used to seeing when the bubble's going to burst. And in my opinion, if you want a more kickback job, that is going to cause a lot less stress and still be very rewarding, although it'll probably pay more than 50% less, consider operations with a software programming specialty, as opposed to a senior software engineer for a FANG company. Unless you know, want to. Just do what you do. You do you.